What's up, ladies and non-ladies? It is Serial back again with some patch notes for you, and then I've got last night's Arena Rush Hour recorded as well. Now, these patch notes are big. They're going to be affecting a lot of people who have the monsters in question, and they're going to be affecting basically everyone, even if you don't have those monsters, because everyone is forced to fight these monsters over and over and over again. And depending on whether you're the guy who has the monster or the guy who has to fight the monster, you're either going to be pleased or very, very displeased by some of this news. All in all, I think most of the buffs were pretty valid. They nerfed quite a few things that were pretty overpowered in my opinion, and they did some really interesting buffs to a few monsters. I, for one, am almost for sure going to be building a Fire Mermaid because of the buffs that they put out in this patch. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on here and see what we think about this stuff. So right off the bat, a very large nerf that I also think was completely justified. They are lowering the chance for Iris, the light magic knight, to strip on her passive by 40%. It's still going to be a pretty solid chance once it's skilled up, and it's a triple hit on your main target. So I still think she's going to get used. I hear people saying, oh, she's trash, throw her away now. I still think she's going to be a pretty strong monster. I think before the nerf, she was ridiculously, brokenly overpowered, and I think she very, very much deserved a nerf. I guess we won't see for sure until we have to start fighting her, but I feel like she's still going to be strong enough to get plenty of play, and maybe she'll just be brought back in line with where she should be. Now the next one, when I first read it, I wasn't very impressed with the amount of nerf, because this is another monster that I feel deserves a huge amount of nerfing. But the more I talk with other people, I think this is actually enough of a nerf. Almost a question of if it's too much. But I'm gonna go with I don't have a light dice magician, so screw you guys that do, and we'll call this the right amount of nerf. So right off the bat, the light dice magician Tableau is going to keep his more or less same functionality on the attack bar stuff for his 3 allies in Arena or 2 allies in Guild Wars. Where the nerf is happening is for himself. He is not going to be gaining the attack speed buff from it anymore, and he is going to be get an unresistible stun. So even with will runes or immunity, he will get stunned. So they took away the chance for him to do his awesome sauce attack bar button and then stun you also with his number 2. Frankly, I am completely over the Orion, Gemini, Tableau, 6 billion in 5 turns in a row, stun the universe, violent bullshit. So happy to see this happen to him. Frankly, I think Orion needs one also. I'm tired of Orion getting 4 turns half the time he goes. For that matter, I have a much bigger problem fighting Orions than I ever did fighting Tableaus. Following up those 2 huge nerfs, we end up with basically just a flat damage increase to a lot of the unicorn abilities, starting with 11% on the low end and going up to 25 and 31%. We'll have to see if this changes anything. Realistically, I'm not a huge fan of just flat damage buffs like that, so we'll see. I don't expect to see a single more unicorn than we already do because of a flat damage buff like that. Next, we have another monster that probably got the biggest hit out of this whole patch. That's going to be your Laika. Firstly, he's losing his ability to stun on his passive counterattack revenge juice thing. They just took the whole stun away. Obviously, that is a huge nerf. Where it gets gray is whether they nerfed or buffed his potential damage on the revenge. It used to be just a proc based on his attack power. He is now going to be casting his first skill auto attack when he revenges. I'm reading this as a damage nerf. Maybe we won't know for sure until it actually happens. I'm not sure. The one plus side is that he's going to be putting dots up, but realistically, without the stun spam, we are going to see a lot less of Laika. I do not think Laika is, fodder now. I don't think he's trash, but I think he was ridiculously strong in Guild War and RTA before, and I'm glad they nerfed him. Good riddance. So we'll see how that plays out once it actually drops. Obviously, any of you that own Laikas feel very, very, very differently about that. Now, for the 5 of you that have a light Dragon Knight, I'm still considering this a nerf. Maybe you'll call it a buff. I guess it depends on where you're using him. Honestly, I don't know where he gets used because there's 5 of them on the server. His old passive used to let him get 250% extra attack power. His new passive is only going to let him get 200% attack power, so he will be hitting softer than before. He will, however, be stacking his stacks much quicker. So earlier in the fight will he start getting his power. I think in prolonged fights like raids, he's going to be doing less damage. In quicker fights, he's going to be doing more damage. Anytime that you're not going to get capped on your stacks, he's going to be doing more damage now. Next, we got the one that hits me the hardest, or I guess at all. They are nerfing my beloved Rakan. So Rakan is not changing in functionality. They are just straight up reducing the damage on his collapse spam revenge to 75% of what it used to be, which, as much as it pains me to say it because I have one, is probably totally deserved. He was and is very, very strong. I think he'll be plenty strong even after the nerf. So as much as I would like to be extremely upset about this, I think overall, in the terms of balance, it was probably a good move for them. In air quotes, screw them for killing my monster, but I think it was a good move on their part. I actually fight against Rakan a lot more often than I use my Rakan, so in that aspect it will help me. The thing that I'm upset about the most is I have a feeling it's going to ruin my Chiruka farming time, and I might end up having to start looking for a different fodder farmer, but we'll see how much time gets added after the nerf. Now, the ninja family as a whole is getting a decent amount of love this patch. The main thing is that they're getting attack speed scaling added to a couple of their moves. We're gonna have to wait and see what that actually does in practice, but I will definitely be playing with both my Susanoo and my Orochi once the patch lands and see if we can do anything fun with those. Realistically, I don't think I'll end up using either of them. They're just not quite my playstyle. So I'm definitely going to want to play with them, see if they end up doing some obscene, stupid amount of damage. And it's nice that they're trying to bring units that don't really get played back into the limelight, but I'm not seeing or predicting a huge resurgence of ninjas after, the first 2-3 weeks where everyone's playing with them. I think they'll fall back off the map looking at the particular buffs they got. There's just so many monsters that can do a giant shitload of single target damage. I don't know that we need 2 more, but we will see. The next chunk of buffs, I don't exactly understand why they're happening. Neither of the monsters were in a bad place, I would say, but you're getting buffs to, Fire, Wind, and Light Occult Girl, but for all intents and purposes, basically Fire and Wind Occult Girl, as far as most of us are concerned. Not too many Light Occult Girls running out there. So first off, the skill 2 that Fire, Wind, and Light Occult Girl share, their AoE stun, it's a pretty solid stun. That is getting a 2-turn attack speed decrease. just added onto it for free. So a lot of Rica and Charlotte owners are going to be very pleased with that. And then for some reason, Rica's third skill, which in my opinion is already quite strong, is getting buffed all the way around. Right now it has a 40% chance to lower attack speed and inflict dots. That is getting changed to a 100% activation chance. So a very nice and welcome upgrade there for the Rica owners. Now the one that I think is going to actually change the amount of occult girls that we see is the buff to Charlotte. Rica's already pretty strong and Charlotte is not necessarily weak, but we see a pretty strong amount of Ricas already. I don't see a whole lot of Charlottes. I think we're going to see a decent amount more Charlottes now that their third skill is also getting buffed. They are doubling the amount of attack bar reduction coming out of the Charlotte's third skill. The light elemental passive is getting buffed because Come To Us ran out of stuff to do and all they had left to do was buff Vanessa, and they couldn't let that happen, so they got hard at work to buff the light elemental. So now the 0% of you that currently use a light elemental will continue to be the 0% that use the light elemental after this patch drops. The next piece is actually pretty exciting twofold, both for the light Vagabond, Darion, and the dark Vagabond, Jubelle. Both of them are getting their skill 2 switched to something that is scaled off of their hit points and attack power instead of just scaled off their attack power like it was before. And Darion, along with Fire and Wind, if anyone uses those, is also getting an increase of 20% to his attack debuff on his skill 2. So Darion's going to be stronger in PvP, along with Jubelle being stronger in PvP, and they will also, as far as Darion's concerned, be more useful in raids now that they're applying the attack break better. Speaking of Darion in raids, Darion is also getting a 5% buff to the damage reduction on his passive. Now we're only adding 5% damage reduction, but that is making his already highly valued passive in raid 33% better. It was 15%, and we're adding an entire third of that onto it to make it 20%. I'm pretty thrilled that he now is not only going to be doing a lot more damage than Diaz in your raid group, but he will also be lowering the damage intake of the rest of your team better than Diaz. I am currently using Darion in my raid group. My next project is probably going to be to make a second raid group, and I'll probably be using Darion in one and Diaz in the other, so I'll be using them both anyway. But I like Darion. I have an affinity for him. Diaz is just the other guy that I'm going to bring in my second team. Not that he's better or worse than one or the other, just my feelings. I would rather go on a picnic with Darion than Diaz. Now the next bit actually confused me quite a bit the first time I was looking through this stuff. Both the mermaids, the fire mermaid and the wind mermaids, are getting some very solid buffs right now. The fire mermaid is getting two things of note. Currently, her third skill silences you for 2 turns, which the problem with that is, well, A, that it's only 2 turns, but B, that it can be stripped and removed by people like Veramos or just some random cleanser. The skill is getting changed to be a skill reset, like that of Delphoi or Sekhmet. Much, much stronger. Fire Mermaid's third skill is way, way better now. In addition, Fire Mermaid used to have an auto attack that had a 50% strip on it. that 50% is getting raised to 100%. So a much better 1 and a much better 3 for the Fire Mermaid. The Wind Mermaid is similarly getting 2 extremely strong buffs. The Wind Mermaid, I actually built one already and tried to use her as a ghetto Sekhmet. I ended up abandoning that project, but after this next patch I will be revisiting it because it looks like a much better version of that. Her third skill is a triple hit. The first hit of that will now have a 100% activation chance for a strip. Her second and third hits will be trying to increase the skill cooldowns and break the defense. I'm unsure whether her first hit will also try to do either of those things, but is now feasible on a perfect luck that the Wind Mermaid can strip a set of will runes, break something's armor, and increase the skill cooldowns by 2 turns and help you kill a Theo or a Perna or something shiny like that, much like I use my Delphoi for right now, except that the Wind Mermaid might be able to strip will runes for me. So I'm very excited about that. She is also getting a buff to her second skill. This is going to be a full cleanse on a single target and the health bubble just like it was before, but they're also lowering the cooldown one, so fully skilled it is going to be on a 2-turn cooldown. I am going to be looking at using her and something else wind. Unfortunately, I don't have a Chasoon. In Guild War comps where I can force the enemy to hit, say, a Grago or a Bulldozer, and then put 2 wind guys on the side that aren't going to take flak and heal the crap out of my guy in the middle, like you see me do right now with my Kamoon and my Fire Panda and Grago usually, or the same Kamoon and Fire Panda with a Bulldozer instead. I would like to be able to replicate that with wind units and water units in place of the Kamoon and the Fire Panda, and I think Wind Mermaid is going to make a good candidate for one of those 2 support monsters. Now, speaking of not having a Chasoon, something that I've tried in the past was Fire Undine. I wanted to use her as a replacement for Chasoon, and it didn't quite sell me on it, but I'm definitely going to have to re-look at that after this new patch. Her AoE heal, which was the main attraction, is getting buffed very considerably. It's going from a 15% to a 25%, and that is not just the heal. She will even everyone's hit points like a Brian does on Revive, and then add 25% to everyone. I think that that is going to be a very attractive heal. I do have quite a few fire monsters for PvP, so I do want to look at her. We'll see what happens with that, and she might even be great in raid because she's also getting the dot removed from her auto attack crit, and it's getting replaced with an attack power debuff, which will make her fit quite nicely in a raid team. Fire and light for, again, 5 of you. Polar Queen also got 2 changes, one of which is going to be a very nice buff for raids. If the target is immune to sleep, it's going to do 50% extra damage on her super death murder face nuke. I'm hoping that will be a separate 50% multiplier, in which case she will be doing very, 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 very large damage in a raid setting. The other one I think was intended as a buff, but I don't know if I'm sold on it actually being a buff. Her Aura of Dawn skill is going to maintain the AoE attack break, but it is losing the bubble that it used to give her whole team, and is instead switching that portion of the skill to an AoE glancing debuff. So I'm definitely not going to call that a straight up nerf, and in fact it might be a straight up buff, but I'm sure quite a few Fire Polar Queen owners are going to be a little bit annoyed that that bubble's going away. we shall see what people have to say about that after it goes live. Now, all the stuff in this bottom section down here, except for two things that we've already talked about, I mentioned those when we were talking about the individual monsters that it affected. Stuff like the awakening bonus on the mermaids is down in here, and they again tell you about the changes to the fire occult girl and the polar queen, but it's stuff that we already talked about up and above. The one new thing, or the one other thing that's still down in this area, is that both Rina and Jultan are getting probably a fairly notable buff. The way both of their passives are working right now is that if you hit a Rina or a Jultan with a multi-hit ability, say you hit it with an Orochi, if the last hit crits, it will proc both of their passives and give them the shield or murder you with the Jultan passive. But if the first 4 hits from your Orochi crit and then the last ones don't, then the passive does not proc. They are changing that, so if any of the multi-hits that hit a Jultan or a Rina crit, the passive will activate. So it's going to be a nice little buff for people that use either one of those. People still use Rina competitively in arena defense. I see her occasionally in Guild Wars, but I don't think that that is an actual in-game thing. And kind of the other way around, I still see Jultans occasionally in arena defense, but I don't think that's so much a super late game thing. But I do see them in Guild Wars at a fairly high level, and they can be quite problematic. So people will be benefiting from both of those changes, and not to mention it's just going to make the Jultan floors on TOA that much harder. After all, it wouldn't be a proper patch note without Com2uS including some way to screw with you some more in Trial of Ascension, almost always by buffing one of the dark monsters with a super annoying passive. Thanks again for that, Com2uS. Alright guys, that was kind of long. We talked about a lot of stuff. There's probably like 3 of you that are still here at this point, but to those 3 of you, thank you very much for hanging out with me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you think of the patch notes in the comments, and if you enjoyed this thing, please take the time to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time.